Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the NGA podcast, where we talk all things gymnastics. I'm your host, Rebecca Grady, and I am here with my only incredible co-host.
Dr. Ian Kreider.
So it's just Ian and I today because everybody is at the amazing NGA UK performance camp that we did not get invited to, sadly.
Ridiculous.
And I think what we're going to talk about today is something that comes up a lot in gymnastics, especially with younger athletes, and that's Sever's disease. I said it right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So it's one of the most common causes of heel pain in growing gymnasts, and I'm sure Ian sees it all the time. I see it pop up in our Facebook group all the time. And I obviously see a little bit of the mental side of that with athletes, but I think maybe educating all of us, coaches, gymnasts, parents, that will help us understand more of what's going on, where it's affecting us mentally and physically. So today I'm going to pick Ian's brain, and we're going to have him answer a ton of questions. So, Ian, let's maybe just start with the basics. Just let us know exactly what it is. If someone's coming in here and they're like, I have no idea what Sever's disease is.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Sever's disease, disease is probably a strong word. It's not contagious, although if your gymnast does get a heel cup, probably 30 other gymnasts are going to get a heel cup too, because it's more of a fashion statement. It is, Sever's disease is basically pain at the epiphyseal plate, the growth plate of the heel. So every bone in these young gymnast bodies, they all have growth plates, and that's how the bone gets longer and grows throughout their childhood. So what happens is that an injury that might cause like tendinitis or a muscle pull or a strained muscle, like something like that in an adult, will cause a bone problem in kids. And the reason why is because as they're growing, their bones are actually weaker than their muscles are. So what would cause a muscle pull will cause a fracture in a kid, right? And that's because as an adult, our bones are nice and strong and solidified, but these kids that are growing, that especially at that growth plate, those bones are really weakened. And as they grow, or as they go through each growth spurt, that growth plate gets a little bit weaker for the time being because it's busy adding bone, because bone doesn't get added as super mature hard bone. It gets added as like a soft bone, and then it solidifies or hardens as it matures. And it's not like that takes a really long time, but when you're going through a really fast growth spurt, that bone is being laid down really fast, and so that weakened area might be a little bit bigger than usual.
So is this something that a lot of kids experience outside of gymnastics?
So it's mainly in like running sports is
Okay.
when kids experience it. You might not see Severs a ton outside of gymnastics just because of the age range. So most sports you hear more about Osgood-Schlatter's disease, which is in the knee. And that's because that happens in a little bit older athletes from what I've seen. So for the most part, Severs happens kind of under the age of 10. Now, 10 to 12-year-olds can get it as well. But usually when I see it, it's less than that. It's usually under the age of 10. And then between the ages of 10 and 12 is usually that knee pain or that Osgood-Schlatter's disease. Then after the age of 12, and this is for girls, after the age of 12, you typically see more like normal stuff like wrist pain, back pain, ankle pain, things that are not as growth related, and they're more like repetitive use related. But yeah, so usually that heel pain is a little bit on the younger side, which is why I think you don't see it maybe as often in other sports, but certainly it still happens in other sports.
Okay. And you said that was specific to the girls. So what's the difference with the boys when they get it?
Yeah, so boys, it probably can happen for a little bit longer of a time. And the reason why is because girls grow, it's called peak height velocity, or when someone grows their very fastest growth spurt, right? And for girls, that's the age of 12. And for boys, it's the age of 14. And so that's why, like 12-year-old girls, 12-year-old boys, you might notice that the girls are actually all taller than the boys, not in gymnastics, in like normal population. You might notice that they're all taller than the boys. And that's because boys just haven't hit that really fast growth spurt typically. And 14 is when boys do that. And so usually around the age of 12 is when girls hit it. And so you'll see their injuries happen maybe a little bit before what boys do because they're maturing a little bit later.
Okay. So why is this happening, or why is this so common in gymnasts?
Yeah. So it's just an impact thing.
Okay.
Gymnastics, you take a ton of impact. And if you think about under the age of 10 and the skills that they're doing, a vast majority of the gymnasts under the age of 10 are at least doing a round off back handspring, right? And because that's required for level 3. And so a round off back handspring, you put about 4 to 7 times your body weight through the floor. That's how much force you put through the floor. And so, yes, they might only weigh, like 50 pounds or something, but 50 pounds times 4 is 200 pounds worth of force on the low end of what they're doing. And if they're a really powerful gymnast and maybe, they're a 10-year-old that's grown a little faster and they weigh 100 pounds and they're doing 700 pounds worth of force on their round off back handspring on the
That's a
floor.
lot.
Yeah, that can be quite a bit of force. And you kind of look at that and you go, man, why isn't everyone injured? Right.
Mhm.
But, it's something that, the body can get used to whatever you put it through as long as you give it enough time. But sometimes we just don't give it enough time, or we try and increase that force just at the wrong time, not on purpose, but we just hit it at the wrong time during a growth spurt. And then all of a sudden we go, "Ah, shoot, they're growing like crazy. And competition season's coming up. And we just ran 3 floor routines last night and they did round off handspring layouts or something, and then the next day they show up and they're like, man, my heels are killing me.
Yeah.
And you go, oh, yeah, of course. That just makes total sense once you look at it from that side of things. Maybe you can do something about it. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Depends on how close you look at things.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So how do we as coaches, and I guess parents too, know whether it's Severs or it's just regular heel soreness?
Yeah. In general, we don't get soreness around a joint or a
Okay.
bone, right? So if they're gonna overdo something and like maybe they do a bunch of conditioning and their calf muscle would be sore, but probably not their Achilles or probably not their heel. So really any pain or soreness around the joint. So if you're talking about, my bicep and tricep is sore, but my elbow shouldn't be sore. And if it is, maybe there's an explanation where, I caught with my arm straight and yeah, it kind of got a little sore and maybe a really, really mild sprain. And then a day or two goes by and it feels much better. But that's kind of on the good side of things. On the bad side of things is this like heel pain that you get. And at the very beginning, it just is an irritation. So people get inflammation and irritation confused a lot of times. Right? This type of pain usually starts off as an irritation. What I mean by that is it only hurts when you use it.
Okay.
So if you think about a sprained ankle goes through a process of inflammation, and that would be pain all the time. That would be redness and swelling and that sort of thing, and maybe some bruising as well, but that's more because of the tissue damage than it is because of inflammation. So you might get all those symptoms and you go, yes, it hurts all the time. It doesn't matter if I'm standing on my head or if I'm walking or if I'm got my leg propped up or whatever. It's going to hurt all the time just because of that inflammatory process. And that's what inflammation looks like. Whereas irritation is usually just pain with activity, where you go, man, every time I hit the springboard, my heel hurts. But as soon as I finish my vault, right, I walk back down and everything feels fine. And then it hurts again when I go and punch the springboard again.
Okay.
Yeah. So it starts off as irritation. And if you don't address it there, then it progresses to inflammation. Then it's, man, my heel is really sore when I wake up first thing in the morning. Oh, shoot, it hurts just walking in school that day. And it hurts when I'm just sitting there, right? It's just achy all the time. And that's when we've gotten into that inflammatory stage. Now,
Yeah.
with normal injuries, inflammation is good. If we have tissue damage because we've turned an ankle, then we want inflammation to bring more blood flow and bring more good healing things, right? But in this case, we may not want a ton of inflammation. Yes, there might be some damage there, but it's not damage like a sprained ankle. It's more of just like, man, I've really stressed this thing out and now it's going to need some time to heal. And so inflammation at that point probably needs to be taken out. Most of the time when I talk about inflammation, I go, no, let's keep inflammation around so that way things heal really quickly. With these sorts of things, I found that it's probably better to knock out the inflammation because there's no good reason for it. There's none of that tissue damage. And so we don't want inflammation. Now, let's say, all right, we've been through the irritation phase, we've been through the inflammation phase, and it's the middle of meet season. We're like, well, how bad could it be? Can we keep pushing? Can we keep pushing? Then we get to a separation phase. And separation is when that growth plate all of a sudden widens. And not because they're growing, but because it's about to rip off the bone, right?
Ooh, bad.
And so that growth plate will widen all of a sudden more than it's supposed to be widened with just natural growth. And that's really not good. That's like super, super painful. There's not much that's going to get you relief from that other than just you've got to let it rest. Now, let's say you go, well, but we got state meet coming up and can you still do it? Like, let's just do one routine this week and then we'll just compete at state this week, right? Maybe you get away with it, but maybe you don't. And what then happens after separation is a fracture. And so that's when you get what's called an avulsion fracture, mostly seen in kids. It's very rare for an adult to get an avulsion fracture again because the bone is really strong. But for kids, they can get that avulsion fracture where literally the tendon that attaches into the bone pulls the bone with it. And so you get a fracture because the tendon has ripped the bone off of bone.
Yeah.
So that usually requires maybe surgery, but definitely some rest and a boot and all sorts of fun stuff.
And I'm guessing you're out quite a while for that too.
Yeah, and 6 to 8 weeks is usually pretty standard for letting a bone heal. And so it's usually 4 to 6 weeks in a boot, and then rest for another 2 weeks, and then start getting back into gymnastics after that. Whereas
Gotcha.
if we, at the very, very beginning of things, if we had addressed it during the irritation phase, maybe we take a week and we just kind of go, hey, let's do some soft landings and let's back off for a week. It just, and stretch a little bit, right? And it fixes itself, or you've fixed it, and you can get on with your life after that.
So when you have kids coming in with this, at what point do you usually see them at in the process?
Almost always the inflammatory stage. Yeah, almost always people have waited too long, and now we could have addressed it a little bit faster maybe if we'd seen it during the irritation phase. And I will say I've got like some parents now that I've seen a few times, and I've seen the kids a few times, and now they kind of know what's best and how to operate and how to address things. And so I see them a lot faster. But for just the random person that finds me and goes, hey, you were recommended, and we thought we'd check in with you and see what we need to do about this, it's almost always gone too far, and it's almost always at the inflammatory stage.
So why do you think most people don't catch it in the beginning? Do you think it's just like kids aren't paying attention to it? Do you think they're not being heard? Like, what do you think's kind of going on that makes them reach out to you in the later stages?
Yeah, it's just like so many things we've talked about in this podcast. It's a lack of communication,
Yeah.
right? And so usually the kid says something, right? They're like, "Oh man, my heel kind of hurt on that vault that I just did." And the coach goes, "Oh, okay. Mental note, heel hurt on that vault. Okay, well let's see if you can do a few more like completely innocent stuff. There's nothing wrong with because it could just be I landed weird on the board. It could be I stepped on a rock today at school. It could be right. There could
Right.
be
Yeah.
a lot of reasons why their heel hurt. And if they just now mention it, you just go, all right, well, let's just see how it goes. Usually the first instance of pain is not the time to go, everything is over, put a boot on, it's end of the world is near, all that. So that's usually not the time. But the coach just goes, all right, mental note, heel hurt, right? And the gymnast goes, okay, I told my coach, I did my responsibility in this part of the communication. Now, usually they're thinking, well, of course, the coach will then ask me from here on out how it's feeling. And even my girls do that. And usually, and out of all the coaches out there, I'm probably the one that will follow up a little bit more often. But even I forget, right? Even
Yeah.
I've got 30. I have a small team, but I've got 37 girls on team. I can't remember every stub toe and
Yeah, it's a lot to remember.
my 6-year-old wrist started hurting today when I really didn't want to do conditioning and, stuff like that, right?
Yep.
So it gets really tough to remember all those things as coaches, and the gymnast forgets to keep them updated, and maybe the parent never hears about it. That's a possibility too,
That's true.
because a lot of times parents are asking how practice went, and either the gymnast had a really good day that day and they remember all the amazing things that they got to do and they're super excited and they tell mom and dad about it, right? Or they had a really bad day and they focus on why it was bad, not because the heel hurt, but they went, well, I just couldn't do my vault today.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the parent goes, well, that's okay. It'll get better next time and you can try again. But they didn't ask like, well, why was it bad? Was it because you were picking your nose for too long, or is it because of your heel hurts? So
They push the injury to the back of their
yeah,
brain.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
Or the
yeah,
potential of
so
one.
it's usually just a lack of communication, and that's what we have to work on, is just kind of going, hey, I have to remind myself to kind of go, hey, I need to make sure I ask about this thing again, and I have to tell my gymnast, like, you have to tell me when something
Yes.
hurts. You have to,
Remind me.
and you have to tell me every time it hurts,
Yes.
right? Because you say it once. If you don't ever mention it again, my brain, even though I'm a PT and I've been a coach for a long time, my brain automatically assumes first that it's gone away because you never told me about it again.
Mm.
And that's what parents happen to. And the number of times that I've been on a call with a gymnast And we've talked about like, well, how long's this been going on for? And the gymnast goes, oh, it's been going on for about a year now. And the parent goes, what? You told me about this 2 weeks
Yeah.
ago. You mean that one thing that you mentioned a year ago has been hurting you this whole time? And they go, oh yeah, well it's been bothering me this whole time. I told you about it. They're like,
Yeah, or I told my coach.
yeah, they're like, well, yeah, you told me about it, but you never mentioned it ever again. And yeah, the amount of times I've had that conversation with a parent, I'm like, look, this is what happens to everyone. Kids are not good communicators. They
Mhm.
haven't had enough life experience to learn how to communicate yet, and that's just kind of how it goes.
I know, I feel like you kinda gotta lay it out there, like, "Hey, tell me every time it hurts," like you said.
Yeah, yeah,
But then I also think that becomes a problem too, because a lot of times our coaches have so much going on and they get so impatient.
yes,
Or
yeah,
not
yeah,
everyone, but they
yeah,
get
yeah,
very impatient with their gymnast coming up to them with this kind of information or wanting to discuss things. So the gymnast might put it off because they don't want to irritate their coach. They don't want to
right.
bother their coach too. So I think there's, like you said, a lot of factors involved in how open is communication in our gym. Are we encouraging our gymnasts to come talk to us, or are we sending them mixed signals? Are we like, yes, please come talk to me, but getting upset when they come and
Why are
talk
you
to us?
coming over here?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, go do your stuff. We can talk about this later. So,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, a lot of them, I think it's just creating a better environment for communication
yeah,
or having times when we discuss those things. I just listened to a podcast where a coach was talking about how she just does weekly check-ins with all her athletes. And
yeah,
she's like, I have a big team, but if you do a 2 minute, ask the same questions every week, and
yep,
it's all on the same days before they go or whenever she has it. And it's always something about injuries. Was there anything you needed to ask me this week you didn't have time? So you have that check-in period and you're kind of forcing your athletes to do it with you.
yeah, yeah.
And I thought that was a pretty good idea when I heard that. Because honestly, if you get into a routine and you're asking kind of the same questions, that can go fast versus it being some time consuming process.
Right. Yep. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And like even with my gymnast, like there's a time and a place to let me know that something hurts, right?
right.
If you're going, hey, my wrist is bothering me, and you approach me before practice, yeah, that's a great time to do it. Now, if I am in the middle of spotting like 20 flyaways on the bars and I'm just pouring
Not a good
sweat
time.
and you are about to go to beam and you don't really even need to use your wrist on beam for whatever you're working that day, it's like, hey, that if we can just go through beam and then come back and tell me once I've mopped some sweat off my forehead, then maybe that's a better time to talk to me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, I completely agree. I talk to all my gymnasts or athletes about this stuff, about
yeah,
reading other people's nonverbal communications, thinking about when the best time to approach someone is. And I've actually received some heat years ago about saying these things, but I think
yeah.
it's important to be able to understand other people and what they're going through and being able to read their nonverbal communication. I'm not going to
That's just a
come and
good life skill in general, right?
exactly, for
Yeah.
jobs, college, everything.
Yep.
Honestly, I think that's something that you could pull out at practice. Someone comes up to you at maybe an inappropriate time. You can be like,
Yeah.
"Hey, so maybe this isn't the best time because I'm spotting right now or whatever," explaining it to them, but be like, "This would be a better time to do it."
Yeah, yeah.
So we're giving them the encouragement to please come back. I want to talk to you about this stuff, but also like there are better times and you're kind of teaching them those times.
Yep.
So
Yep.
modeling all that behavior, I think is so great.
Yeah, absolutely. And because I'm most of the time I'm a pretty, you know, pro communication,
You're pretty
very
approachable.
yeah, very approachable. I've got, one new kid on my team that hasn't quite figured me out yet, and she's like, "Oh, sorry, you look annoyed." I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not annoyed at all." Like I don't know how you're getting that, but no, that's my bad. I
I'll
just have
work
a
on this
yeah, yeah,
face.
apparently I have a weird face today. That's my bad. But for the most part, right, my kids know that they can just come up to me, talk to me whenever they need to. And so at a fault, I'm probably going to allow them to interrupt me sometimes and go, okay, yeah, what's going on? And
Mhm.
then meanwhile, I've got like a line of like 6 girls ready to go. And I'm like, oh, shoot, hang on. Be right
Right.
back. So there's good times and places to talk to people. It's a good life skill to have for sure.
Oh, yeah, and I think that's a great place to learn it in the gym because we have to focus on safety so much and
Yeah,
what we're
yeah.
doing. Okay, so does Severs have any long-term consequences?
Yes. Obviously, if you fracture it, that's kind of a big deal.
Right.
But if it's one of those things where maybe you just kind of back off and then you push, and then you back off and then you push, but you never really fix the underlying issue or the underlying problem
Right.
of why it's hurting, then usually what ends up happening is Eventually, you'll stop growing. For girls, it's right around 15 or 16. For guys, it can be as late as 26 years old.
Yeah, I remember you
Uh,
saying that.
yeah, and so eventually you will stop growing though at some point in time. But because of the underlying reason why it hurts, now maybe the heel feels better, but now maybe you get ankle pain. Now maybe you
Mhm.
have Achilles tendonitis. Now maybe you get shin splints. Now you might get some more like adult type injuries, but it's because of the same problem and the same reason why Severs happened in the first place.
Gotcha. So it kind of transfers. And is it because it hasn't healed or?
No, not because it's healed, right? The growth plate would be completely fused at that point, and
Okay.
so there's no reason why the heel would be hurting anymore, but the reason why it hurts is usually because of tightness. And so as we grow, that bone gets longer or the shin bone gets longer, and then the muscle doesn't get the message. And so now the muscle, let's say the shin grows an inch, but the calf muscle doesn't get told to grow until you stretch it over and over and over again, then it grows. And so it doesn't get longer, and so now the calf muscle is an inch shorter compared to that shin bone that's an inch longer, and then it pulls on that growth plate even harder because now it's tight. So that's one reason. The other reason is around each joint is this joint capsule, and so it holds all the fluid in the joint and helps nourish the joint and produces fluid and all this stuff. So there's this joint capsule, and the bones not only get longer, but they also just get bigger, right? The size of my wrist is not the size of my wrist when I was a 6-year-old. It's gotten bigger. Maybe yours has stayed the same, but
I was like, I don't know.
so so the bones not only get longer, but they also just get bigger. The girth of the bone gets bigger.
Mhm.
And so now that joint capsule is filled more with bone. And so now the joint itself is a little stiff. So mobilizing the joint or stretching the muscle that got tight is usually the fix for these problems.
Gotcha. So what can coaches do to kind of prevent this in the first place?
Yeah, there's some overly complicated things you can do, and then there's some not so complicated things you can do. Like
Maybe start there.
overly complicated, right? We could measure every gymnast. Not wait, don't do that. But we could measure their height,
Yeah.
and we could measure the kids' height like once a month or something, and see when they start growing. And when they start growing, they go, "Hey, you are on Plan B now," and you start doing more soft landings and go back to basics, and you get out the foam roller and you get out the stretching, all that. You get on that program or that protocol. You could do that. I'd say most coaches aren't going to do that. I don't know that I would do that. And I've got the knowledge and the wherewithal, and I already have the plans to be able to do stuff like that, but I'm probably going to forget to measure my gymnasts every month. So,
Set a reminder.
yeah, set a reminder, calendar event, today's measuring day. And then that day you have 6 kids out, then you miss them, and then,
Yep.
whatever. You have one kid that you haven't measured in like 6 months.
So hard to kind of follow up with that.
Yeah. So it's tough. So instead, what you can do is you go, all right, I know that kids around this age group are the ones that are most susceptible to this injury. So as part of their programming, when we do a cool down stretch, they're working on their calf muscle. They're stretching it out. They're working on their ankle joint, making sure that it's staying nice and loose, right? And that's just part of their everyday programming. And then also, when I get the chance, we're not going to do round off back handsprings every day on the floor. Sometimes we're going to use an air track or trampoline, even though that was like their level 2 drill was a round off handspring down a wedge mat. Is it the worst thing ever to have a level 3 or level 4 do a round off back handspring down a wedge mat and work on scooping their feet under and making the back handspring
Right.
longer? Right? Yeah, no. Be just fine. You can put an 8-incher at the end, and now all of a sudden they've got a completely soft drill,
Mhm.
and they're still working their round off back handspring just without that pounding. And so if we know that, hey, during this time, this is the big issue, well, then how can we reduce some hard pounding landings? How can we do those sorts of things? And I know gyms that they won't do hard landings throughout the entire summer. I don't have the benefit of being able to do that, unfortunately, at my gym. So we do hard landings all summer long, but we have days where we don't do hard landings, or
Okay.
where everything's on the tumble track, or everything is on the air track, or everything's a pit landing, or something like that. But we don't have the option to do that all summer long because equipment gets taken.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and space is limited. So, but if you can reduce the number of impacts, not just for your little ones, but for everyone, just because if they don't have to do hard landings, why would you?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And because I was going to ask you if you do have a smaller gym and you don't have the equipment or the facility to do these things in the summertime, would you narrow it down to one day a week for hard landings, or how do you normally structure
Yeah,
it
I
in?
mean, in the summer, we're trying to work new skills anyway. And so most of the time, unless you're just willing to do a whole bunch of spotting, most of the time they're not doing all their new skills on hard landings on
Mhm.
floor, at the very beginning of summer. And so what I did is most of the time was soft landings at the beginning of summer. And now, like school just started for us, but now that we're kind of at the end of our summer programming, by now most of the kids should have all their skills at least with a minimal spot, if not no spot at all. Most kids should have all their skills for next year or getting really, really close. So now even my girls, they're like, hey, do you want the air track today? They're like, no, I want to be on the floor today, right? I've got
Yeah.
to get this skill. And so I force them to get on the air track still sometimes. But we've just, instead of 80% of the time on air track at the beginning of summer, now maybe we're,
Gotcha.
20 to 50% of the time on the air track.
Okay. And then when you already have someone that already has Severs or you have a group of them in your gym, because I feel like it happens all at once, like
For
there's
sure.
so
It
many of
feels
them.
like it's contagious
Yeah,
sometimes.
I know. So, what are some of your go-to exercises or stretches that they can do in the gym to kind of help bring them back, help with that recovery?
Yep, absolutely. So if you notice that it's just at the irritation stage where you're just going, I've got like 3 or 4 kids that when they vault, they complain about their heels, but everything else is fine. Like I've checked in with them. Everything else is fine. It doesn't hurt them during the day. It feels fine first thing in the morning. It doesn't hurt on floor. It doesn't hurt on beam, right? It's just that really hard springboard landing that hurts. Well, we're just going to go ahead and go, all right, we need to stretch the ankle. So you can do stuff like heel drops where you get your foot on the edge of a beam or something, right, and drop the heel down with a straight leg. You can do what I call like the knee towards the wall stretch where I put their hands on the wall here. I put one foot like a split stance, one foot in front of the other. And then that front knee, I'm just pushing that knee over the toe as far as it can and come back. The back leg doesn't matter at all. It's just the front leg. So I'm pressing that knee over the toe as far past the toe as it can get, and then I'm backing off. And everything is going to be dynamic at this point because I'm wanting to gain flexibility really quickly. And
Mhm.
so dynamic stretching is the way to go. So, 2-second hold at most just to make sure they're as far as they can possibly go and then back off. Now, if they get pain with the stretch, then you got to just send them to PT. You don't need the liability of going, well, let me figure out the appropriately prescribed exercise for you then.
Right.
Right. That's not under your purview as a coach, nor should it be. It doesn't have to be. Don't put that much stress on yourself.
Yeah.
Get a relationship with a PT that you can send them to. Shameless plug. I do telehealth PT all across the country for gymnasts. But if you need help finding someone in your area, please reach out and please let us know that you need help finding a PT. And I've got friends that work across the country, and I've got a network that I can look up people under. And so there's all sorts of ways that I can help you find a PT if you need one that's close to you.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea to reach out if they can't find anyone. So, if they're already in the inflammation stage, is there anything they can do in the gym, or is that something you're just like, we're resting and we're sending to PT?
Yeah, I'm not going to kick them out of the gym completely still at that point. I want them in the gym as much as they can be, but we're definitely not doing any hard landings at all then at that point. We're not going to do any pounding. We're trying to do everything we can not to make this thing worse. Because if it gets worse, we know it's automatic time out of the gym, or at
Yeah.
least you're in a boot. Now, there are some physicians that want to put boots on kids at irritation phase. Please don't do that. There's things that can be done at that point. If you put them in a boot, the ankle just gets tighter, and then they feel just as bad when they get out of it 90% of the time.
So you need
That's
that
not.
mobility.
Yeah, you gotta keep it moving, especially if it's not hurting to walk and stuff like that. I'd much rather have it out moving than have it in a boot if at all possible. So,
Okay.
so we need to keep it moving unless it gets to that really bad phase, and then you're going to have to stop it from moving just so that a way it doesn't get worse and worse and worse. So yeah, so if it's at the inflammatory stage, they probably have to do some sort of anti-inflammatory something. That might be ice, that might be medication. I usually lean a little bit more towards the ice at the very beginning just because it's not over the top anti-inflammatory. It just gives you a little bit, and it's something that you can remove as soon as you want to, right? Once you take ibuprofen, you can't go, that was too much anti-inflammatory stuff, right?
Gotcha.
So I tend to go towards ice first. You don't have to do an ice bucket and dip your foot in for half an hour and let your foot turn blue and hypothermic and stuff like that. You just put an ice pack on, right? If you have, typically what I say is if you have a barrier, so if you put a towel or a paper towel or something in between the ice and your skin, then you're probably going to do 10 to 15 minutes. If you don't have anything, you're just going plastic bag straight on the skin, then prepare to be miserable, and that's okay. but probably 5 to 10 minutes then at that point, as far as how long you need to ice. It just doesn't, that barrier provides a lot more insulation than just straight on the skin does for sure. And if it goes numb, you're probably good to go. So if you go 5 minutes and the heel is numb, you're like, well, I can't feel anything at all. That's
You're just
probably
done.
enough anti-inflammatory stuff. Ice has done its job. Give it a break.
Sounds good. Okay, so since we're coming to a close, we're going to do this new thing that we decided.
New segment.
And
Whoop, whoop.
new segment, and it's going to be this rapid fire Q&A. And we're going to try to do this with everybody who comes in, and we're going to throw some of our other co-hosts and throw them under the bus, do it with them too.
That's right.
Okay, all right. Dr. Kreider. So if there's no swelling or bruising, is it fine to keep training?
Probably, but maybe not, right? So in the case of an ankle sprain, swelling, bruising, obviously take a break. But the Sever's disease probably isn't going to swell or bruise. It might get warm to the touch, but it's probably not going to swell and bruise. So you have to be careful with that. If it's at that irritation stage, you might be able to get away with it a little bit. If it's at the inflammation stage, we're like, ooh, warm to the touch, but it doesn't look swollen to me. It doesn't look bruised to me. It's not going to bruise because it hasn't been damaged. Right? But the swelling doesn't, like the heel just doesn't swell very much. So you're not going to see a lot of swelling there.
Okay.
So probably take a break, but you have to kind of play it by ear.
Right. So once you have Severs, it'll stop hurting when you stop growing.
Oh, yeah. Kind of, right? Like we talked about.
Yeah.
It'll kind of stop hurting when, like, the heel will stop probably, but then you'll end up with shin splints or you'll jam your ankles every time you land short, stuff like that. And plus, they're 10 years old at this point. Hopefully, at least they're that far along. And the girls are going to stop growing when they're 16. They're going to deal with 6 more years of ankle issues. Now, just get it addressed, right? Go ahead and fix it. Because that's what doctors say. They'll say, rest it for now. It'll stop hurting when they stop growing. What? 6 years from now?
That's a long time to be waiting. Okay, so then what about stretching alone will fix Severs?
Maybe. If it's at the irritation stage, probably. Like, we got to get the calf muscle lengthened back out, and we got to get the joint mobilized and moving better. So at that stage, probably. At any stage after that, you're probably going to have to involve some rest with it.
Okay. And then last question. If the pain goes away, you don't need to keep doing the rehab exercises.
Oh, yeah. If you've addressed the issue, right?
Okay.
So if the ankle is now moving better, then you're good to go. You can probably back off of the stretches. But if the ankle is still tight, you just happen to stop hurting somehow, then, which I've seen happen, but the ankle is still tight, well, then you still need to do the corrective exercises so that way it doesn't come back.
Okay. All right. And then do you have any final thoughts on Severs for everybody who's listening?
Yeah, see a PT first. Don't see, especially not like urgent care or something. But don't go and see a physician first unless you're worried about being broken. If you're worried about a fracture because it's been going on for a long time, you're like, man, we really pushed our luck with this one. All right, go see a physician first. But if it's just the first instance of pain and it's been going on for a couple of days, try and see a PT first because there's a lot of physicians that are going to try and put them in a boot, and that doesn't address the ankle tightness issue.
Okay.
It just addresses maybe the pain because it gives them a break. But then as soon as they start tumbling on it again or vaulting on it again, it's going to come back.
Gotcha. Okay. I think that was good. So the key thing is just catching it early, making those adjustments, trying to get it before the inflammation stage, using that flexibility. And if you have athletes going through this time, like they're in that age range of a growth spurt, then incorporating some of this stuff already into your training program so we can maybe prevent this and having to deal with it during their gymnastics career.
Yes.
So if you have any other questions about Severs, let us know. We have Dr. Ian Kreider here. Please put your questions in any of our comment boxes, any of our social media, and we can get back to you because we can always do another segment on this and answering those questions. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with anyone who could benefit from the conversation. So thank you for joining us here at the NJA Podcast. And until next time, stay happy, healthy, and high performing.